We are thrilled to have with us tonight Martin Edwards. Uh, Martin
Oh,
is a superstar of the crime writing field. Um, he's a multiple award winner. He's a prolific author and editor. He writes in long and short form fiction. He's a critic. He edits anthologies, and he's the current president of the Detection Club. And this year he won the CWA Diamond Dagger, which is the highest honor that our organization can bestow and he won that for sustained excellence in his work in the genre. He's one of the UK's premier crime fiction anthologists, as well as being a noted expert on the Golden Age. Martin is a graduate of Balliol, Oxford, where he took a first-class honors degree in jurisprudence, became a solicitor, and I believe you are still practicing, right?
I am indeed, and one day I'll get it right. But yes, I am still a part-time solicitor, very, very part-time.
Oh my. Well, I don't know how you can do this, but anyway, his latest novel is Mortmain Hall. Have I said that right? Mortmain
You
Hall.
have, perfect. Yeah.
And it's a sequel to Gallows Court. And both books are set in 1930, and they draw on his knowledge of Golden Age crime fiction. And they feature an amateur detective named Rachel Savernake. Mortmain Hall came out in paperback. It was earlier this year in hardback, and it came out in paperback today.
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 Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, in 1991, Martin released his first novel, which turned into the Harry Devlin series about a Liverpool lawyer. And he has 8 in that series now. He also has the Lake District series featuring Detective Chief Inspector Hannah Scarlett and historian Daniel
Kind.
Kind. Professor Douglas Green, who's a leading expert on the genre of crime writing, described Martin Edwards as a major detective novelist who has combined Golden Age trickiness in plotting with modern darkness in the telling. In addition to his many fiction works, I'd like to recommend that all crime writers have on their bookshelves 3 of Martin's books. One is The Golden Age of Murder. It's a widely acclaimed study of the genre between the 2 world wars. Luke, that's your era too. The book won an Edgar Award from the Mystery Writers of America and Agatha Award at Malice Domestic 828 and the Macavity Award from Mystery Readers International in the UK. It won a Keating Award at Crime Fest. Story of Classic Crime in 100 Books. That's the second book I would suggest you have on your shelf. It won the Macavity and takes the reader from the Hound of the Baskervilles to Strangers on a Train. So it's the first half of the 20th century. Then one of my favorites is this one, which really just came out this year. It's called Howdunnit. I've got it right here, if I can manage to do this and not knock things over. It's published in 2020. It was a book that he conceived and edited on behalf of the Detection Club to celebrate its 90th birthday. It discusses the art and craft of crime writing and the nature of the crime writer's life. The contributors range from Agatha Christie and Dorothy Sayers to almost every living member of the club now, including John le Carré, Ian Rankin, Val McDermott, and Alexander McCall Smith. There's great stuff in this book. I highly recommend it. It's very stimulating. So welcome, Martin, to the London CWA December meeting.
Well, thank you, Bonnie. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. It's great to be with you all. I've been to London chapter meetings in the past, but of course never in this way. So it's wonderful to see what you're doing. It's really impressive.
This is Luke is actually the originator of this, and he sort of roped me in. So thank you, Luke.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It's
I also didn't mention that you have 4 books come out in this same year. So 4 anthologies as well as your novel. So my first question for you is, Martin, do you ever sleep?
Well, I love writing. It's what I always wanted to do since I was a small boy. So of course, in recent years, I've been lucky enough to get the chance to do these things. So, as a very wise writer called Jessica Mann, who lived in London, once said to me, "The great thing in life is do it now." So that's what I try to do.
Right. Yes, a very good bit of advice. So what is we had an interview a couple of sessions ago with Anthony Johnson, who wrote a book about how the organized writer, and he had a lot of productivity tips. But I think you must have an incredible number of them. Is there like one major secret that you would tell us about your productivity? Like, how do you manage? this output?
Well, I think having an understanding spouse and family helps helps a lot. That's for sure. I think that I think all of us have things in life that we really care about and that really matter to us. And I think that the key thing is to prioritize them and to do those. And the one thing I am quite strict myself about is that I try not to spend much time doing the many things that don't interest me, like do it yourself or gardening or anything like that. So I try wherever I can to concentrate on the things that I enjoy, because as I say, life is short. You've got to do things whilst you have the chance. And if this pandemic has told us anything, it's reminded us that life is fragile, and we have to make the very best of it, whatever the circumstances.
Yes, exactly. So have you found it? Have you found it easier or harder during the lockdown to concentrate and to work?
Well, it hasn't stopped me from writing, far from it, because as you say, I've always had this other life as a lawyer. For most of my life, I was a full-time lawyer and a partner in a firm, so working pretty long hours with that, and therefore having to try to fit the writing in, which was always my main ambition, to fit that in all the corners that I could find, any spare moments I could find. So what has happened with the pandemic for me? Well, first of all, I've not been into the office for more than a year. Don't tell anybody, but that's the way of it. So I'm not spending any time commuting, and I've had more time to write this year than ever before. And although all of us have missed things, and we've missed the social side of writing enormously, missed the contact with fellow writers in person, with readers and libraries, bookshops, but at least I've had this compensation of having time to write, and so I've tried to make good use of that time. So I have been doing a lot of writing this year.
Excellent. Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of writers have mentioned that in some ways it's been better for them because it's not even, you don't even have to prioritize. Some of the stuff has just been taken off the table.
Yeah, that's right, and it has been difficult for a lot of people, I know, and concentration, I think, for a lot of writers has been a problem. I think the very fragmented way that I've always had to approach the work of writing has probably turned out to be an advantage, because I'm just used to getting on with it whenever I get the chance. So I've just had more chances this year than previously.
I like that phrase, getting on with it. Definitely. Few writers write criticism and nonfiction and also write fiction at the level you do. So, I mean, those are not like two different brains, really. I mean, the two different kinds of writing completely. So what could you describe a little bit the difference in your practice, your research, and sort of your mental state between writing these two very different kinds of things?
Right. Well, they are different, and maybe the non-fiction falls into two sections. I'll talk about that in a moment. But for me, being a novelist has always been first and foremost. It was what I wanted to be when I was a very small boy, when I discovered Agatha Christie at 8, and then Sherlock Holmes, and I have actually brought along my early masterpieces. The series of not just one but 3 books I wrote when I was 10, featuring a detective called Melvin Hughes, who was a kind of shameless rip-off of Sherlock Holmes and Agatha Christie, but set in the present day of that time. So I've wanted to do this for a very long time. It was the only thing I ever really wanted to do. I didn't dream of being a lawyer, I can tell you that. But although I've been fortunate, I've enjoyed being a lawyer. But it was really something my parents pressed on me as a way of trying to earn a living to support this weird fancy that as they saw it. And of course, it was very good advice, because we all know that writing is a tough game, and there are many downs as well as the ups. So I think that was always what I wanted to do. And then I found when when I became a solicitor in the 1980s, I got the opportunity to review law books and write legal articles. And it was a way of getting published. So the first publications of mine were legal articles and then legal books. I wrote a really racy yarn called Understanding Computer Contracts, and then Understanding Dismissal Law, which nobody would ever want to read, really. But I was very, very happy to be a published writer of non-fiction. I was pretty young. I was what, 25, 26, 27 when I was producing those books. And they did quite well. They were good for me career-wise, because if you write a book about a legal subject, the clients tend to think you know something about it. So that's good for you in that sense. But it was also good discipline. It was a way of dealing with publishers and meeting deadlines and then writing for newspapers, magazines, many articles. So I got into the way of writing non-fiction originally through writing legal stuff and reviews. And of course, the thing that you learn from that is that you need to get it right, because if you write a legal article and it's wrong, then you'll be sued and you'll be ruined, which isn't good. So that was a good discipline. It was a good training ground. I carried on writing until a few years ago in the legal field, and turned out quite a lot of books and articles. But the novels were what I really wanted to do, and that I found was harder work. I still find it harder work. I'm sometimes described, I read, as a prolific novelist, but in fact I've produced 20 novels in 30 plus years, just over 30 years. That's not terribly prolific. It's not bad, but it's not super prolific. I think with the non-fiction, that's a different matter. And to get back to your specific question, parts of the brain, we have the creative brain with the fiction, and that creative, imaginative process is, for me, quite a slow process. But with the non-fiction, I think it falls into two parts. There's what you might call the journalism. So I write a blog, I might write articles for different platforms. I'm very interested to hear what Sam was saying. I'm sure I'll be dropping her an email about that. But that's one kind of non-fiction. And then there's the kind of non-fiction that resulted in the golden age of murder. Narrative non-fiction, where you're using the techniques of the novelist to tell a story. It's factual, but I try to tell the story of those times and the writers who are at work in those days. So that is, I think, to me, a kind of hybrid writing, a cross between the straight non-fiction, the factual stuff that's got to be right, and then the fiction, which is basically made up. Imagine it. It's escapism. So a book like The Story of Classic Crime in 100 books, it deals with the 100 books, or in fact 102, because I'm not very good at arithmetic, but it deals with those books, but it also tells a story. You mentioned it's the story from The Hound of the Baskervilles to Strangers on a Train. I try to tell it as a story, whilst giving quite a lot of factual information about the books and the authors concerned. So I think there are three types of writing in my case. There's the fiction, there is the non-fiction, and then there's this stuff in the borderland between the two, which is essentially non-fiction, but has this kind of element of narrative to it, which is what really fascinates me, the idea of telling a story. That's what I was doing when I was 10 years old, writing those little books, and that's what I've always yearned to do, to tell stories.
Well, that's an interesting answer. It's interesting to me that I think crime fiction is very difficult to do well, and yet it's been dismissed and disparaged by some people as being a lesser genre than lit fic or literary fiction. But I wonder really if I know you've commented on that in Howdunnit, and also several of your contributors have. Ian Rankin, for example, says crime fiction is good for you.
Yes, he
He
does.
elaborates on that. Which I agree with. So, two questions about this. One is, first of all, is crime fiction good for you? And second um, is it is there any reason that it's any lesser of a genre than literary fiction?
Well, I think this idea that it's somehow inferior dates back to the time after the First World War, when the golden age of detective fiction was emerging. I think in the days of before that of Wilkie Collins and Charles Dickens, that there was less of a sort of class distinction about it. But of course, industrial quantities of detective novels started to be written post First World War, and you got this kind of snobbery. There's a famous essay by the American critic Edmund Wilson called "Who Cares Who Killed Roger Ackroyd?" Well, there's a fairly blunt answer to that. Quite a lot of people, and a lot more people than care about Edmund Wilson's opinion, I have to say. But, but that was emblematic of the kind of snobbery that you got about crime fiction. And Raymond Chandler, The Simple Art of Murder, is often taken as disparaging of Golden Age detective fiction, British detective fiction. But if you read it carefully, it's much more nuanced than that. But what happened, I think, is that you did get this element of literary snobbery, and it's become very persistent, and it's irritated many writers for a very long time. I think the good news is I think the battle is being won. The war is being won. And I think that it's becoming very, very clear to the vast majority of people that crime fiction at its best is high-grade literature. So I absolutely agree with what Ian says in his lovely essay. It's very much to the point. But I think that this disparagement has never really bothered me, because, as I say, from being a young boy, that was what I loved. That was what I wanted. I dreamed of becoming a writer of detective fiction. So it never really bothered me that it was seen as second class, because I didn't really care. I mean, I can never, I think, be accused of being fashionable, and my views about detective fiction, I think, were out of fashion for a very long time. So my early novels, the Liverpool novels, I had a concept for those books. They started writing the first one in the 80s, and they were mainly published in the 90s, with one that came a bit later. And my grand idea was that you'd have this very gritty contemporary Liverpool setting, but golden age plot. And I was very wedded to that as an original concept. And those books did quite well. The first one was nominated for the Creasy, and they got well reviewed. But there's a snag, and the snag was that none of the reviewers ever commented on the golden age elements, the plot, that kind of thing. It's all about gritty Liverpool. Why was that? It's because it was out of fashion. And I became very frustrated. I became, in the later books in the series, clearer and clearer. I started referencing Agatha Christie directly, and trying to spell out what I was doing. Still, nobody paid any attention, because it had just reached a point where the traditional detective story, although loved by millions of readers, and of course we know that Agatha Christie has been eternally popular, but most of the other golden age writers, and the same, of course, as you well know, Bonnie, very true of Sherlock, but most of the writers of the past had faded out. And I think that was a great shame, but it really just illustrates fashion. And luckily for me, I've survived long enough to see, quite unexpectedly, the wheel of fashion has come round in a way that I find very appealing, at least for the time being.
Well, that's yes. I think that's a wonderful way of putting it. Yeah, I'm also very happy about that. One of the points that was made in Howdunnit also was that some of the tropes that we think of are just connected to crime fiction are the same things that are used in literary fiction. You know, themes of despair and murder and theft and jealousy, and I mean these kinds of things that spark the mystery, the crime writing plots are often present in literary fiction. So it's really kind of a strange a strange way to differentiate fiction.
Yes,
When
yes, it is. There are great books, and then there are books that are not as great. But that's true of all forms of literature, I think,
true.
and it's true of crime fiction, and it's true of crime fiction in its different subgenres, I think, and it's true of crime fiction written at different periods of time. There are good books and there are not so good books, and it's how well it's done that is the key, not the type of story that it
Yes,
is.
yes. Crime fiction is very much execution dependent. Maybe is more so than almost any other kind of writing, I think. Now, how important do you think location is in your setting for your crime fiction?
Well, I think it is very, very important. The Lake District series, which was my second series, really came when my editor at the time, David Shelley, asked me to consider writing a new series. He published a standalone that I wrote. He said, "You've written an urban series, but I'd like to try a rural series. So go away and think about that." So I did. I thought, well, where would I like to go and visit to research? I like the Lake District. So that's how the Lake District series came out. The idea of somewhere that is not. I live in Cheshire, so it's not too far away. Somewhere that I love that. I felt was rich in possibilities. So the setting's important. The Liverpool setting in the first series is important, and you have these disparate elements, don't you? The ingredients in a crime novel. You have the people, characters. You have the place, and you have the plot, and the aim. Easier to say than to achieve, but the aim is to achieve a level of quality with each of those elements. So the setting is vivid, and the plot is strong, and the people are brought to life. This is what I think we're trying to do. It's not just one element; it's the combination of the three that we're working with, whatever form of crime fiction we're engaged with. We're trying to do the best that we can in those three main areas.
Yes, exactly. Somebody quoted. I don't know I can attribute this to, but someone quoted once that the plot is secondary, though, to character. And if you don't like or are interested in or believe the characters, you won't be carried along on the plot. Like just the plot alone is not enough. That the characters are vitally, vitally important for that. Do you agree with that?
I think that from a personal perspective, I do. I've read a number of detective novels in translation, a few French Golden Age locked room mysteries from the 1930s, which are very ingenious, but are pretty flat. And there are the books of the Golden Age written by British authors that are clever but dry. And if the people aren't interesting enough, we do look. We're social animals. So even nowadays, we're social animals. So or we try to be. We aspire to be. So people are very important. And of course, there are these quotes. Character is plot. Well, that's sometimes true, at least. But certainly, I think characters are really important, and a plot, although plot matters to me more than it does to some writers, it doesn't. I like to think it doesn't come at the expense of characters. These different elements, I think, do go hand in hand in a book, at least in terms of what one's trying to do.
Right. Yes, definitely. You sort of answered this question a little bit when you talked about becoming attracted to the Lake District and wanting to set something there. But so the question really is, when you conduct research for your book, is it the chicken or the egg? In other words, do you dive into an arena, a time, a location, a profession, or a cultural phenomenon and let it speak to you, and then you mine the gold there? Or do you go looking for a specific holy grail that you have in your head?
It will vary really from book to book. With the first two series, I found after a while that what I was trying to do with the Liverpool series, I realised as I was working on it, was to try to create an overarching picture of a city emerging from very dark times and reinventing itself. And that was very interesting to me because I was living through it, working in Liverpool for many, many years. With the Lake District, I soon realised what the overarching theme was, and that's rural England under pressure, rural English society under pressure. And these elements are there in the background of the novels. And again, relatively few critics have commented on them, but they're certainly there, and they're there in my mind. So they don't predominate, but they are important to me. With the more recent books, I began with a character, this woman, Rachel Savanake. I'd reached a point in my career as a novelist when I wanted to do something different. I'd tried that with a couple of standalone books in the past that I was happy with, but they didn't make any great impression on the world, it has to be said. So I still wanted to try to do something different. I'm always trying to do something fresh, even within a series, trying to keep myself interested and engaged and find some novelty. Because I think if I'm engaged, then you've got a better chance the reader will be engaged and not quite know what to expect, even if it's in a series. Trying to avoid the formulaic is really, really important, I think. So I with Gallows Court, it was a pure experiment, and it was a risk because I didn't have a contract or anything like that. But I began with the idea of a character, a young woman who arrives in London. She's fabulously wealthy. It soon becomes clear, is extremely ruthless and dangerous, and she's involved in some bizarre murder mysteries. And a young journalist, Jacob Flint, tries to discover what her real agenda is. So that was the idea of Rachel Savanake. And as I say, it was a pure experiment. And for once, I didn't have any idea of how it would work out. I didn't know what the solution would be. And in many ways, that book is more a sort of thriller than a detective story. But I was very taken with the concept of the character. And I wrote a short story about the character just to see whether I liked writing about it. And I did. I never tried to sell the short story, but it was an exercise to get me into the mindset of the character. And so I wrote the book. It took me ages. It took me about 3 years to write it. And then my agent sent it around, and it finished up with a wonderful publisher who offered me a 2-book deal. So that was good. So Gallows Court had a sequel of Mortmain Hall. So the summary of the answer to your question is that it does depend. It depends on what I'm trying to do at any particular time. Am I looking at a setting and then fashioning stories around that setting, or am I looking at a character and trying to work from there? It will vary, in my case, from book to book.
Yes, that's interesting. Writers recount varying ways of doing this. I mean, of course, there's the pantsers and the plotters, but I think we all do a certain amount of just feeling out, even if we are planners and plan ahead. Yeah. I think sometimes you'll discover a surprise in the environment, or yes. Just it'll pop out at you. That certainly happened to me when I was researching up in the Highlands for my second home. Yes. came across some very interesting things up there. So there's a question from the audience. The Wheel of Fashion is interesting. This person, I don't know who asked this question, but the Golden Age fiction heavily deals with conquering chaos. Do you think the current fashionable, the fashion now for Golden Age is because of social unrest? So are we drawn to it so much right now because we're searching for a taming of the chaos in the fiction that we consume?
Well, that is a very interesting question. And of course, there are parallels of some kind between life in the 1930s and life in recent years. That there are parallels, although there are also important differences. But I think when we talk about conquering chaos, there's perhaps a bigger question. It's often said, and it's been said by many wise people, including W.H. Auden and P.D. James, that the detective story is about restoring order in society. And there is some truth in that, but I tend to think myself that the issue with crime fiction generally, not just talking here about the classic Whodunit, but crime fiction generally, is dealing with uncertainty and trying, if possible, to resolve uncertainty. It's not quite the same as restoring order. You know yourself, Bonnie, and Les will also know this, that in the first dozen Sherlock Holmes stories, quite a few of them, the criminal isn't brought to justice. And that's true in Agatha Christie's. The idea of the restoration of order, I think, needs to be seen in a wide context. It's not just about going back to where we were. It's about trying to address the things that are uncertain and unpredictable and create tension, suspense, but also fear and apprehension. And goodness knows we've been living through a time of enormous apprehension of late. And I think the idea that strikes me most forcibly is that the crime novel, in all its different forms, presents a good and sometimes superb vehicle for addressing the question of uncertainty in life.
Yes.
You do that in a million different ways. And that, to me, is part of the essence of the appeal of the genre.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think of Sherlock Holmes as comfort food for the intelligent.
Yeah.
And because I mean he will get it right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And justice is served in some way, if not necessarily
in some way. Yeah.
Yeah, in some way it is served. Les, are you around? Can you join us? Are you there, Les? I don't know where he is. Les, are you there?
Yes, I have to turn on my microphone. There we go.
There you are.
Okay, sorry.
So I wanted to introduce Les to most of you. I don't know if I had a chance to do that before you all got here, but Les Klinger is one of the foremost Sherlockians in the world, and he has many points in common with Martin. Besides both wearing green sweaters, both of them are lawyers who are phenomenal in the crime fiction world and experts. And like Martin, Les has edited numbers of anthologies. He knows every crime writer in the world. But here's what I want the two of you to talk briefly about, if you would, is that Martin, you have a series
Yes.
for the British Library, and Les, you are about to do a similar series for the Library of Congress. So I thought I would put you two together briefly on this.
Well, thank you. So, Martin, nice to see you. Last time was Hawaii, so please talk a little bit. I mean, your interest in Golden Age fiction has gone beyond creating your own and writing about it. You've been the general editor now of the British Library's series of Golden Age classics, the reprints, which is done, by the way, done very well in America. published here in America by Poison Pen Press. Tell us about the series. So sort of where did the idea come from? And what I really want to know is, how do you pick the books?
Right. Well, I'll try to be succinct, which is always a challenge in my case. But the background inspiration for me is that I've always been fascinated by the idea of the life of crime, the life of the crime writer. And it's always fascinated me that writers have come and gone. Christian, Doyle are the great exceptions, but by and large, writers, even writers who are very big names in the day, tend to fade out of fashion and are sometimes unfairly neglected. And that's always bothered me. And it's always bothered me when very good writers I've known personally have given up. I've seen a lot of that over the last 30 years, and it always saddens me to see a really talented writer just become dispirited. And it's really one of the reasons why I became involved with the Crime Writers Association board and spent a couple of years as chair, because I think supporting crime writers, trying to motivate people when times are tough is a really important thing. So that's a background interest of mine. With the British Library specifically, it just so happened that I had a coffee with a guy called Rob Davis, who just arrived at the British Library. And we were talking about the possibility of the British Library staging an exhibition about the history of crime fiction. Now, that never came to pass. But he mentioned that he'd started publishing he'd published a couple at this stage of Golden Age books, and he was trying to develop some interest in it. And they hadn't gone particularly well. So he was going to relaunch the series with new jacket artwork, vintage railway posters. And he asked me to write a couple of introductions for two very obscure books, one called The Cornish Coast Murder by John Bude, and one called The Lake District Murder by John Bude. So I agreed to write those two introductions and did so, and thought little more of it. And then I got an excited message from Rob saying that the early sales had just gone through the roof. Now, I would like to think it was all to do with the erudite and informative introduction.
Of course, of course.
The beautiful covers were the real explanation, as is so often the case. That was what made the difference. But that series really took off, and I started writing more introductions. I was asked to be the consultant to the series. And I started then to suggest titles. The books published in the first year or so were not books that I had suggested. But when I became involved, I was keen to broaden the reach of the series, both in terms of time and in terms of the style of story. Because I think that the beauty of crime fiction is its sheer range, as well as its quality. And so I started suggesting titles that were a bit different from the early ones, but they seemed to go down well. And so that has continued to be the case. The books come out at the rate of one a month. I've also, as Bonnie mentioned, I've edited probably now about 15 anthologies of short stories, each with a different theme for the series. And the sales have been phenomenal, over 1 million paperbacks in Britain alone, not counting Kindle. And then very good sales in the States, but also in places like China, Japan. I was in China last year, and the interest was absolutely astonishing. I was quite overwhelmed. So it shows us, doesn't it, that the appeal of these stories is much wider and much more enduring than the critics used to maintain, and that these books of the past, many of which were out of print for 60, 70, 80 years, still have some enduring quality. And I think that firstly, it's got to be the quality of the story, but secondly, they now, as you will know with your new series, they're social documents. They tell us something about the time, and that's fascinating.
Absolutely.
Because today we can learn a lot from crime fiction, because whenever you're writing, I'm sure Bonnie would agree with this from the perspective of her Sherlock Holmes novel. Whenever you write, you may be writing historical fiction, but you always come at it from the perspective of who you are and when you're writing. That's inherent in the writer's craft. And so inevitably what one does as a writer, even if, as the writers of the Golden Age certainly weren't trying to preach or send social messages, with very few exceptions, even if you're just trying to tell a story or spin a yarn, create a puzzle, play a game with the reader, even if you're just doing that, somehow the magic of fiction means that you're saying something about the world you inhabit as well. And that to me is interesting.
I couldn't agree more. What are there parameters, time parameters? I mean, in terms of how far back you're prepared to go with this series?
The time parameters, there's been nothing before 1920. Before I was involved, they'd published a few Victorian novels, which hadn't, again, done particularly well in sales terms, although they were very, very interesting books historically and deserve to do well. So 1920 until, I tend to draw the line at about the end of the 60s, so going back 50 years or more is the rough yardstick, and that's the yardstick I apply for the stories, the short stories as well as the novels. So I will come up with suggestions for authors. Sometimes the estate can't be traced, or sometimes as with John Dickerson Carr, I make specific suggestions, but the rights to those books aren't available, so other books have been published. The same is true of John Road. But it's a constant joy to see the delight of a new generation of readers discovering for the first time the pleasures of writers like E.C.R. Lorac, a woman called Caroline Rivet, who was my parents were great fans of hers. They introduced me to her books, but they've been out of print since she died at the end of the 50s, and those books have done incredibly well, and it's a real joy to see that. Very, very gratifying.
Is there an official involvement? Do you have to deal with the library staff and the officialdom there to get approvals?
Well, I deal with the publications department. Those are the people that I liaise with. They, I have no doubt, have to deal with the bureaucracy of the British Library, which is a major public body and a national treasure. But of course, like most public bodies, it's probably a very complicated organisation. But I don't get involved in that side of it, nor happily do I get involved in the process of licensing the rights or tracing the estates. That is all done by the British Library. And so my role is to act in effect as a kind of literary consultant, write the introductions and so on.
It's
Have they
interesting.
vetoed any of the titles?
Sorry.
I was going to ask, have they ever vetoed one of the titles you selected?
Well, it's not so much a matter of veto. I don't think there's ever been a veto, but there have been a number of authors I've suggested where we've simply not found who owns the rights.
Right.
And they are very, very firm in their view. And as lawyers, we would agree with this, that they're not going to take a chance. They're not going to risk it. So that with one or two authors, I would love to see reprinted. The absence of a clear evidence of ownership has been a problem. And then there have been other books where the rights have been elsewhere, so it's not been possible to license them. So that's been the main constraint.
So let me interject here and say that we're going to have to unfortunately move on from this because Luke has a schedule. Where are you, Luke? But anyway, I want to thank you, Les, for joining and asking these questions.
My pleasure, and thank you for the plug. Yes, we shamelessly copied Martin's idea here, and it's called the Library of Congress Crime Classics. We have 3 books out already. Anna Catherine Green's That Affair Next Door. I'm looking up at my bookshelf here. The Rat Began to Gnaw the Rope by C.W. Grafton, and Case Pending by Del Shannon, spanning the period from 1898 to 1961. And we've got a lot more in the pipeline. We're only doing them quarterly.
And C.W. Grafton was the father of Sue Grafton, wasn't he?
Yes, indeed.
So we're going to, attention everybody, we're going to, Les will be back as our guest of honor at a later session, and we'll be talking all things Sherlock Holmes and a variety of things of his anthologies as well.
Well, compliments of the season to you all. It's the middle of the workday for me, so I will go back to work. Thank you.
Thanks, Les. Thank you for joining us.
Cheers, Les.
Our pleasure.
So I have one more question for you, Martin. You kind of mentioned it in passing, and that is, but you said when I asked you about how you were doing in the pandemic, you said you were doing fine, and basically it's about just getting on with it, and it's realizing we don't have all the time in the world. We have just this time, and so I think writers work in a vacuum, and we are all prone to moods, and some of us face uncertainty and despair. And I just wondered if you had any words of encouragement or things or techniques that you might suggest to a writer who's losing confidence.
Well, I think that it is, as I hinted earlier, it is a very common problem. I think that there are very few writers who, certainly amongst those writers I know plenty, there are very few writers who don't go through dark periods. I mentioned before that to me the worst things is to see a good writer giving up. And I do think that the key is somehow to find a way, and it will be different for different people. I don't think there's a formula, but to find a key in one's life, in one's approach to one's work that enables one to keep going, that determination to keep at it, because one day the good times will come back again, and you don't know when. You can't always control it, but what you can control is you can keep writing and writing the best stuff that you can. And goodness me, I've been dropped by publishers on quite a number of occasions in quite a range of different countries over the years. And of course, when it happens, or when an editor wants a massive rewrite, whatever it is, it's always challenging, and you're allowed to feel a bit of despair for a day or two, but you don't want it to go on too long, because at the end of the day, you owe it to yourself to, if you have that belief, despite all the setbacks, despite the cruel people on Amazon or whatever it may be, who are saying terrible things quite unjustifiably, you should somehow find a way, and it will be different for different people, but find a way to keep going, keep at it, and one day, the tide will turn.
Yes, well, I think that is an excellent way to end this. Thank you so much, Martin. You've been very inspiring and informative, and just a delight. So I want to
thank you, Lily, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much.
We have 3 really, really cool readers with us tonight. I announced them earlier, so we're going to start with Simone. Simone is the author of the Chastity Riley novels, published by Orenda Books. Simone was awarded the Crime Cologne Award in 2016, as well as the 2nd place for the German Crime Fiction Prize for Blue Night, and she currently lives in Hamburg with her husband and son. If you've not read the Chastity Riley books, I highly recommend them. I think they're great. So, Simone, please take it away.
Yes, hello. Good evening. I'm reading from my current novel, Mexico Street, just to show you. And I think if there's one thing we're all missing at the moment, then it's maybe sitting in bars. So I'm going to read a little bar scene to you. Normally my series is taking place in Hamburg, but this little moment is taking place in a small town near Hamburg. It's called Bremen. So now we're sitting on bar stools in a line along a long bar, Lindner, Rockteschel, Stepanovic and me. The yellow light is gradually patching us up, hour by hour, and by now so much beer has flowed through us that not even Lindner is annoying. We're barely talking, but we're smoking a lot to make up for it. Now and again, someone grows something. Stepanovic has his hand on my knee, but then he likes to do that sometimes. That's his way of keeping in touch with the outside world when he bows out and turns inwards and thinks. He only takes the hand away when he says something, and at some point, the fog around us is pretty thick by then, he says, "Rockteschel, what exactly happened to your father?" I'd never have dared to ask that question so clearly, but the elephant's been in the room since yesterday, and at times today it was so big that it barely fitted into Bauman's office. It was squishing us all against the walls. Rockteschel stares at the beer pump. "Gunfight on the Disco Mile," he says, 2006. My father was sitting in one of the first 2 police cars to arrive. I catch the barman's eye, raise 4 fingers on my left hand and say quietly, "Vodka." The barman fills that many empty glasses. "He took 2 bullets," Rockteschel says. "One here," he puts a hand on his belly, "and one here." He touches his left temple. I just started a physics degree, but after my dad bought it, I joined the police instead, in a fit of romanticism. Stepanovic lays his hand on his back. It's no good, the sadness spills out everywhere. We take the vodkas and pass them on. Rockteschel and I were the same age when our fathers were killed by guns, except that my dad pulled the trigger himself. Rockteschel raises his glass. "People from port cities always have hope," he says, and I think, where's a fucking port around here? Then we all raise our glasses and drink, probably to our fathers. The strokes are blasting out of the speakers. Lindner slips off his stool, pushes it away and dangles himself over the bar so that we all can see him and waves his index finger in the air. None of that would have happened if Bremen had more police. That's a total failure by the Senate. He actually looks as though he believes what he's saying. Bremen doesn't need more police, says Rockteschel, showing the barman that we'd like another 4 vodkas, please. Bremen needs Batman. So, and if you want to hear another small bit, this is really a really short bit from the kind of the second plot. It's a love story between 2 young people. And yeah, if you all have kind of reunion fantasies after the pandemic, here we go. We went to the harbor every night, every bloody night. Bridges 1 to 10. And beyond. He walked from Return Again Point in the middle of the harbor to the fish auction hall. Sometimes when it was raining, he even walked to the beach. He'd been in Hamburg a year now. No trace of Elisa. Until that night. He was just about to go. Bridge 7 swayed beneath his feet, but he was used to the swaying. It suited him. Then she came towards him on a black bicycle. He recognized her the moment he saw her. His heart briefly stopped beating, and then it beat all the harder. It caught up on all the beats he dropped into the water over the last year. She got off and walked towards him. Her face was unchanged, even if it was a little pale. The sun that filled up on together on the island had vanished. And her hair was no longer long and black. It was dyed red and rather straw-like from being dyed so often. It looked as though the color had been stirred up over a fire in the cellar somewhere. But anyone who knew Elisa would recognize her straight away, by her wild eyes, by the rage that burned within them. She stopped beside him. He didn't know what he should say. "So now you're here," she said. "Yes," he said after a while in which he could do nothing but look at her. "Now I'm here." She laid her hand on his face, in the middle of his face, and started to cry. He took her in his arms. He took the bike in his arms too, along with everything else. He took everything there was in his arms. His arms were made of rubber suddenly. He wrapped them around her as often as he could. She spoke into his neck. Had he got cigarettes? Yes, he said. Did he have a flat? Yes, he said. Did he have curtains? I've got blinds. Okay, let's go. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And what's your, so the current book that you have at the moment is Mexico Street, correct?
Yes.
And is there's a new one coming out soonish?
In March, yeah.
In March. Okay, there we go. Because I saw it online, but I couldn't remember the date off the top of my head. And what's the title of the next one as well?
The title is Hotel Cartagena.
Yes.
And this one, Mexico Street, is about kind of criminal clans, and it's a lot about organized crime and about people behaving in these closed systems and structures and trying to break out. And in Hotel Cartagena, it's more like a, I don't know how to say it in English, like a chamber play. Is this the word you're using too?
Closed room, locked room mystery kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a locked room. Yeah. It's set in a hotel bar, and there's a hostage taking, and the background story is about international cocaine dealing, and
nice.
It's a bit rough, I think.
Good. I look forward to reading it. I've actually read your books. I'm not just saying that. I've read them. I think they're great. So I look forward to reading the next one. Thank you so much for reading for us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
Most welcome. We'll have you back in the future.
Thank you.
Good. We're going to move on to the next reader, which is Oscar de Muriel. So Oscar was born in Mexico City, and he moved to the UK to complete his PhD. He is a chemist, a translator, and a violinist, and now lives and works in, are you still in the Manchester area? Your website's in Manchester.
No, it needs to be updated, but I actually moved last month, actually. I'm in Lancashire, so not far.
Okay, that's right. So he's going to be reading from his latest Frey and McGray book, which is a Victorian Edinburgh-based series that is freaking awesome. I love it. So take it away, Oscar.
Well, first of all, I want to say it's a bit spooky because I saw Bonnie had a violin in the background. My first book is about a haunted violin that whoever plays it dies. And also the first word I'm going to read is Bonnie.
What a coincidence.
What a coincidence. So I'm not going to do my Scottish accent. Last time I did it sounded a bit Punjabi. So, anyway, I'll get serious now. It's supposed to be a spooky fragment. Bonnie night on Dig the Dead. The close whisper sounded amidst the sheer, solid darkness, along with the frantic thoughts of spades on dirt. Eyes open or shut, it made no difference. The night was so black that the two snatchers could not even see the borders of the grave. All they had for guidance were the ruffles of their clothes and their chattering teeth. And even if the skies opened, which was most unlikely, there'd be no moonshine to speak of. Reminds me of the night we dug up poor Bessie McBean. Nice lass, a middle class. We did a wee bit of hornpipe dancing, if you take my meaning. I didn't know it was her grave until we opened the box. Imagine my yelp when I saw her face, still plump and pretty. A wee bit green, but not near wormy yet. His companion dug a little faster. I do feel sorry for her, don't you think me a beast? I knew she was for the dissection table to be cut open and her bits put in crocks. But the trade's the trade. Oh, maybe you've seen her eyes in the college, floating in one of your jars. Green they were, and she had this odd speck in... Oh, do shut up. Oh, getting scared, lad? As note was the only reply. And I haven't even told you about the real scary nights, like those times the witches got there first and held themselves to fingers and scalps and livers. I said shut off, do you not? There was a clank then, metal on metal. One of the spades had just hit the hinges of the coffin. Shallow grave, said the court snatcher after a satisfied whistle. You're lucky, those grave diggers must have been desperate to go home before their asses got frozen. Blindly they scrubbed the loose soil from the cover. They heard the spade scratch what must be wrought iron ornaments. A deer box, said the snatcher, producing a crowbar from his coat's inner pockets. He wasted no time and removed the lid, with little noise and no ceremony. The younger man in turn produced a handkerchief, but before he had a chance to take it to his nose, not even a waft of stench yet, he mumbled as he heard the coffin crack open. Must be the cold. Told you, lad, bonny night for trade. The younger man struck a match then, lighting the ditch with a glow that seemed blinding in the pitch black night. Oh, put that out for fuck's sake! It has to be the right corpse, the young man retorted, bending over the dead body. The first thing he saw was a pair of yellowy, bony hands, as dry and creased as an old parchment. The pale skin appeared to glow, resting on an old black dress and clutching a little prayers book. The snatcher moved the light towards the face, saw the glint of a thin gold necklace, and moved the light on too. God, his gasp came from the bottom of his stomach, a nasty prickle spread across his spine. He could say no more, for the other man shushed him, pulled the match and smothered it in his bare hand. The darkness enveloped them again, and they listened out. They waited for a few moments, perfectly still and breathing cautiously. Silence. We better hurry, lad, said the snatcher, already shifting the corpse. The face, his companion whispered, not yet recovered from the fright. Her face has this. I cannot tell. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. So this is a passage from the Dances with Serpents, correct?
No, this is the sequel to the Dance of the Serpents. It's not published yet.
Okay.
It's actually work in progress, and this is going to be the last book of this series. It's a bit like the end to my Harry Potter series, if you will.
Oh wow! Okay.
Because when you know for those who don't know my series, it's about these two detectives. My editor pitches it as the Victorian X-Files.
That's good.
So the sister of the main detective, she goes berserk and kills both their parents, and chops off one of his fingers, and that's why his nickname is Nine Nails McRae. And they never know why she went crazy or why she killed their parents. And she the last thing she said was that she was possessed by the devil. But they never really realized if that's true or not. And in this book that I just started now, that everything will be revealed.
Ooh, well, that's very exciting. So this will be the end of the Freya McGray series then, completely.
I'm going to take a little break, and I still don't know who's going to live and who's going to die. So if I decide to keep them alive, then I might come back to the series in a few years' time. Yeah.
If you do kill them off screen, so that if you want to bring them back, you can with ease. Do the Conan Doyle.
Yeah,
You don't see a body.
Yeah, like the Conan Doyle waterfall. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Fantastic. Cool. Thank you for reading tonight, Oscar. That was
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So next we have Amer Anwar. He grew up in West London. He has done everything from being a warehouse assistant to a comic book lettering artist, and a driver for an emergency doctor, and chalet rep in the French Alps. That's interesting. And a creative art worker and graphic designer. He has an MA in creative writing from Birkbeck, the University of London, and is the winner of the CWA Diamond Dagger Award for Brothers in Blood, which is awesome.
Yes, indeed. So, thank you.
Take it away.
Okay, so this evening I'm going to be reading from the follow-up to Brothers in Blood, which is my latest novel, Stone Cold Trouble. It features the return of our main characters, Zach and his best friend, Jags. And one of the storylines in the book concerns Jags's uncle, who's unfortunately nicknamed Lucky because he's anything but very lucky. And he's managed to sort of lose a very valuable family heirloom in a game of cards. And the piece I'm going to read is the two friends have been roped in to try and help him retrieve it. So Lucky was already at Jags's when Zach arrived. As soon as he saw Zach, he said, "Good, you're here. Let's go," and was out of his seat, heading for the door. Jags rolled his eyes at Zach and shrugged. Outside in the driveway, Lucky said, "I'll drive." So the three of them got into his Mercedes, Jags in front, Zach in the back, and off they went. Zach was glad of the air conditioning, which kicked in fast. "Where exactly are we going?" he asked. "Out towards Slough," Lucky replied. "That's where the guy lives." Zach knew the area a little, having made deliveries out that way before. "Listen, boys," Lucky said, "I've got to get that necklace back, okay? It's really important. I've got the money I owe the fucker from the card game. I've even added another $2,000 as a bonus or whatever. Just make sure you get the necklace." "Yeah, all right." Zach thought Lucky was being a bit over the top about it. If the guy got the money plus some extra, what was the problem? Lucky drove to Uxbridge, then turned west onto a smaller road, heading away from the urban sprawl that marked the edge of London's expansion. After a while, the terraced houses lining the road thinned and then disappeared altogether, replaced by trees and thick greenery on either side, open sky above them. It was amazing how quickly you could leave London behind and feel you were in the country. Every so often, they'd pass a large, impressive house, set well back from the road, hidden behind walls, fences, and security gates. The number of properties increased as they neared the village of Ivor, but was still relatively spread out. It felt a million miles away from the noise and colour of Southall. They passed a pub called the Black Horse, which made Zach think of another pub in Hounslow with the same name, where he'd met Rita's ex-boyfriend a few months ago. That hadn't turned out so well. He tried to think about something else. Ivor itself was a little more built up, but they soon passed through it and left it behind. They turned left at the 5 Points roundabout and, if anything, their surroundings became even greener, branches meeting overhead in places to create a natural tunnel through which they drove. A little further on, Lucky slowed down to let a car pass in the opposite direction, then pulled across the road and stopped at a driveway that led to some security gates. A huge brick and timber house could be partially glimpsed through the trees behind the walls that flanked the gates. "Here we are," he said. "This is the guy's place." He'd stopped the car across the driveway rather than facing the gates. "Come on then," Zach said. "Let's go in and see him." Lucky just looked at him and Jags. "Are we going in or what?" "It might be better if you go in by yourselves," Lucky said. "I'll wait here." Zach frowned. "What are you talking about?" Lucky hesitated. Finally, he said, "When I came by myself last week to get the necklace back, I might have told him to go fuck his sister. And his mum. and a few other things. Bet that helped, Jags said. Lucky leaned across Jags to open the glove compartment and took out a thick white envelope. Here, he said, handing it to Jags. There's 12 grand in there, the 10 I owe, plus the extra 2 to sweeten the deal. 12 grand, Jags said. That's some crazy money to be betting. He opened the envelope and thumbed through the wad of £50 notes inside. Banjo, I was positive I had a winning hand, Lucky told them. So maybe I got a bit carried away with the betting. You'll get carried away, all right, Jags said. In a pine box, if Auntie ever finds out. Well, if you get the fucking necklace back, she won't have to, will she? Lucky was petulant. Like a kid, old enough to know better, getting told off for still taking a shit in his pants. Come on, Zach said. Let's just go and do it. Jags got out, folded the envelope in half and stuffed it into the front pocket of his jeans. You walk in looking like that, Zach said, indicating the bulge it made there. They'll think you're really happy to see them. I'll be happy to get this done and get out of here, Jags grumbled. Thank you.
Wonderful. I love that. That was great. So,
Thank you.
Are you not doing the audiobooks because you should be?
I'm not, I know. But yeah, I'd be happy to if that was good enough. I mean, I don't know. I hate the sound of my own voice usually, so.
It was very dramatic, and I was like, I know on the first one you don't do the first one. The second one isn't out in audiobook yet, is it?
It's not yet, not at the moment.
I say give it a go.
Well, I'll pitch myself. I'll say that I'll say that people have said I should do it.
There you go. But thank you for reading. Thank you, Oscar, Simone, Martin. Thank you all for being here tonight to see us out at the end of 2020, a very bizarre year. And hopefully sometime in 2021, we can start having these events in person.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. And you know, who knows? We would try and keep it some element virtual so that everyone else who's not in London can still join. But yeah, you know, that's the end of the night. Everyone can just chat and hang out and have some more whiskey. My whiskey's gone.
Yay, cheers. Thank you, Martin. That was
Cheers, everyone.
Visit. Really appreciated it. Thank you so much.
Well,
Yes,
thank you. And I really enjoyed the readings too. They're great.
That's
So well
good.
done.
Thank you.
Very nice. Yay. Yeah, very good readings. Wonderful.
So make sure you pick up everybody's books. So go buy Simone's books and Oscar's books and Amer's books. Go buy them all because they're great. And Martin's. Buy them all.
Martin's, yes.
All
Absolutely.
books. Buy the books.
I'm putting the 3 that I recommended everybody have on their shelf. I'm putting them in the chat right now. So
Good. There's plenty of time for these to become nice little gifts.
yeah.
So how's everybody doing?
Just going to say thank you guys for organising these because they're just so fantastic. I love the readings. They give you such a window onto the different books, don't they? So they're so good. Well done, guys. And there's the contrast between them is just awesome. Brilliant. Really good.
Good.
Martin,
Vanessa, I wanted to ask you, is your name spelled with double S and one N?
Yes, it is actually. Well done. Yeah,
Okay.
Vanessa at writing.ie. Yeah, I'll put it up here, but I can change it. Yeah, everybody spells it wrong. Yeah, one N, two S's.
Can you put the website in the
Yeah,
chat?
I can, of
please?
course.
That'd be lovely. Martin, do you like to read aloud when you're asked to? Do you like that or not?
No, I'm not very good at it, and it's always daunting to hear people who are better at it because many are, and certainly our 3 readers today have been great. But it's just not something I've ever really enjoyed. I feel too self-conscious. However, talking, chatting, answering questions, fine, no problem. But just reading and wondering what people are thinking about it, I feel a bit bashful about.
I just an informal poll. How many people enjoy reading from their books in places? And how many people would rather not read from their books in places?
Well, what we are doing in Germany, we're reading 2 hours an evening.
Really?
Yeah, that's what we do. We're doing 2-hour programs.
I would need a meal.
Is that allowed?
It's allowed. It's crazy and it's paid. It's totally
We've
crazy.
met her.
Wait, so how is this being done? How like
Yeah.
Different authors or
the readings, these 2 hour
Yes.
readings? How is this being done? Is this who's organizing this?
It's like, you know, it's organized by festivals or bookshops.
Oh.
Like when you're doing festivals or events, you're doing conversations and panels in the UK. And in Germany, it's like, you know, we have this reading and listening culture, and we already learn it in school. Authors are coming to school and are reading for 1 or 2 hours. I did this in schools too. So you sit there in front of an audience and read from your book and tell stuff, do conversation with yourself and with the audience, and then you have a break and everyone's kind of drinking and eating, and then you start again. And it's about, sometimes it takes about 2 hours.
Wow.
And Simona, you sing sometimes, don't you?
Yes, sometimes I do, but I have to drink a lot before.
Maybe you should sing for us all. Sorry guys, I can't show you me because I'm actually sick and I have my nightgown on.
This is Karen, isn't it?
Yeah, that was
Karen,
Karen.
Yeah.
It was lovely to hear you, my lovely publisher.
Karen, you don't know what any of us are wearing below the waist.
I have on top that is least attractive, believe me. I'll give you a quick snapshot. Nighty.
Hello.
Okay,
The
good
Sun
enough.
Queen.
That looked actually quite glamorous.
I did very glamorous.
Yeah, it did.
Very
You're
1950s
like the
movie
Queen
stuff.
out of Chronicles of Narnia.
Oh God.
I don't know if you want to call people the White Witch, Paul. Come on, man. Come on.
I won't bother pitching to Karen anytime soon.
So how many people are writing through the holidays?
Do we ever stop, guys? No.
No.
Yeah.
But I need to back up. So wait, Simone sings, because I don't know if Karen finished her point. What's going on with this singing?
I need a dark bar and a lot of beer.
We're about 1.5 years away from that.
So let's say 2022,
That's like a date.
when we all got the double shot. I
Yeah.
will sing again.
Are you allowed to drink when you do the school readings?
Yes, of course. In the morning. Yeah. That's normal in Germany. That's how we educate our children. You know?
It's not that different over here. I'm a school teacher over here. Yeah.
How do you deal with swearing in your book if you're reading to the children? Do you just bleep it out or skip over it, or?
I'm bleeping out.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh my god.
Or I'm just skipping it. Yeah. It depends if the teachers are in or not. So.
And how old are the kids?
Mine?
No, the ones that you read to.
15.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But I'm not swearing so much when I'm reading it.
Just killing people.
But they love it, don't they?
Yeah.
They love swearing.
Yeah, they're allowed to do everything when I'm reading, so they like it.
So I'm curious. So Oscar, what was your inspiration for writing about Edinburgh? Because I love it. I've the PhD that I'm working on is a 1920s story set in Edinburgh. I fell in love with the city, helping Bonnie on one of her fringe events, which we ran into you at Blackwell's that time.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Many years ago now, back in the distant past of 2017. But yeah, what was your
We
inspiration?
were so young and innocent, and, with a zest for life.
Yeah, what was the inspiration for writing Victorian Edinburgh?
It was a bit similar to Martin because I wanted to write something Victorian, but I knew I didn't want to do London again because it's been done many times, probably better than I could do it. And back then, not that many people had done Edinburgh. And I just thought if I need to travel somewhere to do some research, I'll just pick a place I really like. And I just love the city. And it's just perfect for a crime mystery with all the cobbled streets and the little
Yeah.
places where you think you're gonna get murdered and
cotton factories and stuff like that.
yeah, exactly. I was gonna bring whiskey as well, but
Yes.
probably my reading would have been a bit better.
It's all right. I've had a few glasses of Johnny Walker Black Label. So it's all good. No, actually, I love Edinburgh, but it's interesting because when I started to kind of propose my project, both of my supervisors tried to push me to move it to Glasgow. I was like, I don't want to do Glasgow. I want to do Edinburgh. It's more interesting. Like, oh, but it's more touristy. I'm like, I don't give a care.
I think I think if you're not from the UK, you probably prefer Edinburgh. That's what I've seen from experience. Yeah. And if you're from the UK, you might prefer Glasgow.
Yeah.
And I do see the appeal of Glasgow because it's a bit grittier and a bit more industrial. Even back then in Victorian times, or in the 1920s, it was.
Glasgow has the best bar that has nothing but Scotch in it. Glasgow has, it's called the Pot Still.
Oh yes.
Yes, we had a little party there for Unquiet Spirits. The Sherlock Holmes Society of Scotland, which is like 8 people in a pub, basically. It was really fun. And they have, a wall of these different scotches, and they're all, some of them are really rare and unusual and crazy. That's a good place to visit. And the guy who runs it, he wears a utilikilt. Have you ever heard of that?
God.
You know what a utilikilt is?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's basically a kilt made out of, heavy sailcloth, and it's got all these pockets for your tools. Okay. So, like, if you're a handyman wearing a kilt, you have all your stuff in your...
The only
completely new to me now.
Utility kilt should be strongly advised not to.
What's weird is that they're made in Seattle, these utility kilts.
Yeah.
Poets wear them as well. The poet Chris Cheek, who's like a concrete poet, he wears a big utility kilt. Yeah. So poets and builders.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
I remember during my my undergrad years, I did my undergrad at the University of Manchester, but my campus was in Didsbury, and there was a handyman on site, and he was American, but would always wear a kilt like that. And it was very,
like with all the pockets, you mean?
Yep. Yeah, because he would always have all his tools all in his kilt, and it was very bizarre.
It's a thing that I think it's a Scottish guy, but in Seattle, who invented this. And I was there with my cousins for something, and I walked by the store. It's like, there's the Utilikilt store. So I had to go in there. They come in many colors and configurations.
I need to get one now.
Yes. Do you have any kilts or anything like that, Oscar?
I do have a kilt because actually I went to Glasgow for Howdunnit, because one of my best friends from Glasgow.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I was forced to wear it.
I don't have the legs for it, so I don't think I'll ever wear one.
Just don't do any work up a ladder. That's all we ask.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember it was a K-lid, so I was always really worried about not spinning too fast.
Yes. No, I was going to say, Martin, I really loved the... I asked the question earlier about the chaos thing, and I really liked your response about instead of crime fiction focusing on restoring the chaos, about addressing the uncertainty. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there with that. I think that's really fascinating, and I think that's a point, because my PhD is in crime fiction, and that is an angle that I haven't really come across yet in my research. It's a lot of times it's split down the middle between the golden age and the hard boiled, and it's all about golden age's chaos correcting, and everything else is about just living in the chaos. But that addressing that uncertainty, I wonder how many contemporary writers think about that when they're writing their work. I don't know if anyone here thinks about what they're approaching. Are they doing chaos correcting, or are they addressing uncertainty, or are they just living in the chaos? But I think you hit something on the head there that I might have to consider quite heavily as I write my research paper, actually.
Well, I do believe in it, and I also believe very strongly that there are more connections between the different types of crime fiction than is often thought. And I understand people who say I like X, but I like hard boiled, but I don't like cozy and all that sort of thing. But if you read the good examples of the different types of crime fiction, I think you can see that in very different ways, writers are trying to grapple with interesting issues as well as telling a good story in their particular way. So I am a big believer in looking for what connects writers rather than what divides them. And too often I think we look for divisions and separations and categories, whereas the things that link us, despite sometimes being under the surface, are more interesting and often a lot more appealing and lovely.
That's interesting, because that makes me think of Joseph Campbell and Hero with a Thousand Faces and his whole kind of philosophy about looking at the myths and things like that. His whole kind of approach is that if we spend more time looking at the areas where we're similar and where we connect, we can find more, we find more in common and we get along a lot better. So it's interesting, because that's kind of like a crime fiction equivalent of that, which is fascinating. Do you think that because of, I mean, there are some writers in the past that have made, I don't know if they're flippant comments or whatnot, but they've made comments in the past where they have said things like crime fiction can't be literary, and these are popular crime fiction artists or writers. I believe, I think Dorothy Sayers said it at one point, or Raymond Chandler thinks he said it. She said it in his essay. And I wonder if comments like that are part of the reason that maybe hurt the genre in the 20s and the 30s. If the authors don't take it serious, because even Conan Doyle didn't take Holmes seriously.
No, well, you're right, he didn't, but of course he was wrong, wasn't he? Always the best judge of their own work. That's the problem. But it is true that authors, and not just Golden Age authors, have been crime authors, have been unnecessarily, in my view, defensive about what they're writing. And if you read the biographies of some good writers who were also well known in other fields, people like Margaret Cole, or the famous socialist and economist, or Nicholas Blake, the poet Cecil Day Lewis. The detective stories are dismissed, but now nobody reads Margaret Cole's political books, and nobody cares. And yet the detective novels are sought after, and very much so with Nicholas Blake, who is a good writer. Cecil Day Lewis. So I think that sometimes writers sell themselves short. And Agatha Christie, and again, the Christie fans will know this. There's a book, Cards on the Table, where she gives away the solutions to 4 of her earlier books because she thought they were just disposable things that would have no life. But she was wrong. Those books continue to be read by the zillion. So it's a mistake. It's good to be modest, but it's a mistake to be too defensive about genre fiction, I would say.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think what fascinates me is, I mean, ultimately, crime fiction and what is considered literature have the same aim, in my opinion. They're about, exploring the human condition. So it's odd to me that crime fiction is still repeatedly kind of put to the side, and genre fiction of any kind, whether it's fantasy or science fiction, they're all meant to be exploring the human condition. Not all of the books achieve it or do it very well, but then again, not all quote unquote literary books do it well either.
Precisely.
Yeah, so it's an interesting battle that genre has versus versus what's already stamped literature by the time it's you know.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's Crime and Punishment, a crime novel. It probably doesn't matter, does it? But
Yeah.
but it's a novel with a crime in it. But I was reading a very interesting essay the other day by an academic who argued that it was very influential on crime fiction. And I've just been reading a couple of novels by the guy who translated Dostoevsky very successfully for Penguin. And he tried his hand in the 30s at writing Dostoevsky-style detective stories.
Oh wow!
He wasn't Dostoevsky. So they're pretty slow read, right?
Does everybody know that there's a great independent publisher up in Manchester, like a small press called Dostoevsky Wannabe?
Oh.
They're great, really doing interesting work.
Right.
So there are thousands of characters.
1,500 suspects.
Oh, fantastic! Cool. There we are.
Has anyone ever written about a real life crime in their fiction?
I wrote a book about Crippen, a novel about Crippen, told from his point of view.
Yeah.
That was, I mentioned some of my books hadn't done particularly well. That was a book I loved writing. It's a book I'm very proud of. It's my least successful book in terms of sales, but it's a book I really believed in. But it just didn't hit the moment. But I really enjoyed writing that.
I often refer to real crimes in my fiction because they're in the newspapers. That's what people are going to be talking about, and also it might influence the way people think about things. In that they'll say, "Oh, you're like that dreadful whoever it is," you know. So I'm in the Brighton series. They're all talking about Miss Edmonds, and so yeah. But I don't actually fictionalize a real crime. I've never actually done that.
My current work in progress is a serial killer one, and the guy's mimicking. You know, he wants to be a famous serial killer. He wants that fame, and I'm deciding whether I drop the names of these serial killers in or not, because actually it does occur to me that that's an ego boost that they like. So, you know, I don't know. I haven't decided whether I'm actually going to mention them by name yet. I'll see how it feels. But I did refer to a crime tangentially, where they found a woman who they think it looks like she's been submerged in water. They said, well, was she killed in a bath? Like that landlord who killed his partner and then kept her in the bath for 3 days while he shagged his mistress next door, basically. That's a reference to a real crime, but I'm not gonna name the bugger. Just you know, if you know it, you know it.
You say you're not going to name the bugger. Is that because you're offended by what he did, the sort of crime he committed, and you don't want to glorify him?
Yeah, there is part of that. I mean, we're bad as each other. We watch a lot of true crime, don't we? But you know, like an awful lot. I do know all these cases, but I do. Yeah, some of these buggers, they really do glorify the fact that everybody knows their names and that. And I'm just on the fence. I haven't decided yet how I'm going to deal with it. Will I name them? I won't name him. I think it's too tangential. Also, I'm kind of aware of some of the more recent ones. There are, you know, the relatives are still around of the victims, and I just don't want to have it as a thing to study it, to look at the case properly, to write about it and treat it properly. But
well, you don't
a flippant sentence.
You don't want to find yourself in saying so-and-so murdered his wife, he was a scumbag, then 5 years later, after your book's published, DNA evidence proves he didn't do it.
Well, there is that as well.
Rather awkward.
Yeah, so there is that as well.
Classic killers, because there's a lot of...
Just remember this Irish writer, I can't remember her name now, but she wrote about a real life murder, a serial murder, and he got released. And he went to see her to one of her book launches.
Oh yeah, there's a guy with a serial, comes through lots of crime events.
What's the name of Liz Nugent?
Liz is, and the guy, I can't remember his name. Yeah, he has a big hat. He comes to lots of crime events. Yeah, it was a really nasty killing.
Because he told her, what you wrote about such and such person. She said yes. And he said, well, that's me. And she's awesome for, I think that's the best comeback I've ever heard. She said, do you get recognized much?
Oh, ouch.
Best comeback in history.
Definitely. Yeah, he goes to lots of events.
So this guy was a convicted serial killer, and he got released.
Yeah, he wasn't convicted. I think it's Malcolm MacArthur, is it? I can't remember his name.
I'm sorry, confused. Was he released because he was innocent, or he served his time?
No, he served his time. He did about 20 years.
Ooh,
yeah.
Right, okay, that's.
Oh, no, it was a real deal.
It was somebody who had been released as a miscarriage of justice, because that's a little awkward.
No, he's the real deal. Yeah, I think it was Malcolm MacArthur. He's I might have got that wrong, but he's he definitely it was a very brutal killing too. He murdered a woman in the Phoenix Park first, and then he went and murdered somebody else, I think. Yeah, nice man. Wow. And he comes to lots of the events. So you'd be doing an event at Trinity College, and he pops up at the back.
And this is a real life murderer, comes to book signings and stuff. How strange. And you recognise him because his hat's bigger than mine, yeah?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so I'll look out for someone with a
look out for him now. Only in Dublin, as they say. Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, don't do small
so he comes to Dublin.
Yeah, he lived in Dublin. Yeah, he was just. Yeah. He lived quite close to Liz, actually, when the
I didn't know that. Gosh.
Teeth on edge.
I remember years ago, they made a television series called Whitechapel starring Rupert Penry-Jones, and it's all about Jack the Ripper and someone's imitating the crimes or some such thing. I've got it on DVD, quite atmospheric, etc., etc. And when you go onto the special features, there's the actual producer saying, I think it was a woman, so, in reconstructing these crimes, we didn't show the pictures of the real Jack the Ripper victims. We did composites and sort of made them up so as not to offend the latter-day relatives of those victims. I mean, whether or not she achieved her objective in doing that, I'm sure I don't know.
Hallie's book's really interesting, isn't it, about the victims?
Yes.
Yeah, I do remember that show, but I haven't watched it yet. Ripper is a very interesting thing because unfortunately he gets more attention, it seems. Yeah. There's still a lot about the victims, but it's all kind of always through the prism of killer.
Well, he's seen as the ultimate bogeyman, that's why.
Yeah.
Some dark spectral figure lurking in the shadows, so yeah.
I'm trying to remember which series it was. Like, so we watch a lot of these things, and there was one we were pleasantly surprised when it was normal for when the credits started. The credits rolled quietly with all the details about the people who have been killed before the credits rolled, and that kind of so the last thing you saw was not the name of the person who committed the crime. It was the person it was the people that he killed, and I thought that was. You don't always see that. I look particularly at some of these kind of glossy American ones that they're superficially glossy.
Yes,
that's kind of very formulaic. The ones you see on CBS Reality, a lot of them really glorify it, and it's.
Oh, they do. Yeah. I saw Versace. Did anyone see that? The fashion designer.
No, I didn't watch that yet.
I watched about 5 episodes. I didn't watch the entire thing because I just thought it was sort of milking the cow a bit.
I found it too pretentious as well, like the whole script and.
Yeah, it seemed to be glorifying the killer and not showing much empathy for the victim. I mean, that was my take on it. At any rate.
I have to go now, folks. Now
see you later.
Downstairs to eat chocolate, I think.
Sounds good.
I need to go also, and David knows why. Anyway, thank you, everybody. It was a wonderful. Martin, thank you so much for taking time to visit us and sharing your expertise. And
well, thank you. It's been great. I've really enjoyed it, and
such a pleasure.
The chapter's doing really well. It's clear, so that's good news too.
And thank you guys for organising this, because really good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Big round of applause for you. There's a lot of work putting it together.